Welcome to the Hanley Effect, a podcast by the Hanley Foundation designed to educate, change minds, and save lives. Our goal is to inspire you, showcase our innovations, and change the conversation about addiction and mental health. Join us as we unravel stories of resilience, recovery, and hope.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Hanley Effect. I'm John Dyben.
Hello, Dr. D.
Hello, Dr. D.
How are you?
I'm well.
I'd like to point out how good we look in our headphones.
I kind of, not only do we look good, but I'm just like in my head.
Right, you're so loud.
Yes, and I feel like I should use a radio voice.
I don't have a radio voice.
You do. That's nice.
Really?
That's nice. So I'm John Dyben. This is Dr. Rachel Docekal.
Oh, so glad to be here. And two of my favorite people on the planet are with us today.
It's actually a pretty big deal when we can get these two, not only weirdly when you can get either one of them, but when you can get them both at the same time.
Yes.
And I say that totally seriously because these are two of the busiest people on the planet.
Renowned professionals on the planet.
So we would like to welcome and introduce Dr. D. Who do we have today?
Again, two of my favorite people, Debra and Jeff Jay, who are coming to us. I'm really interested in knowing, what temperature is it where you all are?
I want to say I'm a little upset that Florida has more snow than Michigan. That makes me happy because I'm a Duluth, Minnesota girl, and I am just praying for the big snow. And then I'm like, Destin, Florida has 8 inches and we have this much.
Oh, you
totally
only
happy about that.
But is it 10 degrees or more there, or is it 10 degrees and fewer?
It's warmed up. It's actually 26.
26? That's balmy.
We've been cold.
It is.
We've been below zero. But yeah, and then New Orleans, 11 inches, I think. So we're being cheated up here in Michigan. I just want to.
Actually, we're just finally getting our fair share. I'm just like to reframe.
It's 55 right now.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start if that's
you
okay
go
with
ahead.
you. Normally Dr. D starts and I just follow along him. So I just want to say that the two of you have changed behavioral health and the approach that families take to behavioral health and conversations with loved ones. Before you started to do the work that you do, things were very much like, the intervention show where it's all about blame and recriminations and everything yucky, which, of course, every time you do that, stigma wins, right? Stigma's the big bad wolf that's standing in the corner and gets stronger and stronger and stronger with shame and recriminations. And the two of you are all about joy and all about love and all about family and all about, what life could be. And, one of the things that we say, and I think that you all coined this term many, many, many decades ago at Hanley, and we're gonna talk about that history, is that when you get into recovery, eventually you're going to find that you have a life beyond your wildest dreams. And it's my understanding that really came from the two of you. And I love that. And I just want to say, I use that with families all the time. Take this step because eventually you're going to have a life beyond your wildest dreams.
That's right. And
it's really true. And that's our experience, certainly my experience in recovery. And it was really Debra who long ago started using images and language images that accentuated the positive and showed what the outcome could be, the joy, the rebuilding of trust, family, and all of that, rather than the way we always used to talk about addiction and pictures on website of people, shooting up or being alcoholic, all this, let's really showcase the problem,
right.
instead of
Yeah, right.
showcasing the
No.
solution, you know.
The thing is, Jeff, he's just a tech genius, self-taught. I mean, he won't say that himself, but I mean, this is the man when Apple couldn't figure out the problem, he did and called them back to let them know. He really, so back, we remember back 1999, year 2000, there weren't a lot of websites yet. And the ones on addiction all had those black and white or blue and black, and the alcoholics falling down the stairs.
Right.
And, I said, well, Budweiser doesn't do commercials showing somebody puking in the toilet, they're on the beach, girls have got the bikinis, everyone's happy, they're playing, volleyball. And we have to show the destination, the wonderful, wonderful destination, not just the beloved alcoholic or the beloved addict, but the entire family. Mm-hmm. And that's been a puzzle over the years, the entire family. So,
yeah.
And that's where you have really, and I'd love to talk a little bit more about that because you've both really spent a lot of the past 5-10 years, really, even more than that, really focused on that. And I'd like to say that in a way, it's Hanley's fault.
It is Hanley's fault.
Hanley's fault.
We're so mad at Hanley.
I want to tell you, it is Hanley's fault. First of all, I mean, we can talk about the history, but, Jeff and I met at Hanley, and we always like to say not as patients.
Not as patients.
But of course,
I'm glad that we clarified that.
Yeah. Our beloved Carol Colleran kind of played matchmaker too. I remember being in the cafeteria with her, and there was nobody there, and Jeff came in. He was new, big head of curly hair. And she looked at me, Carol, she looked at me and she goes, he's not as young as he looks, because he looked like he was 22, And, but we got married, and we were still working there. And one day we had an epiphany. We were home, and I don't know how to describe it. It was this.
It was a spiritual thing. It really was.
And we realized at that moment, it all comes down to family. That's where all the power is. Mm-hmm. I mean, we didn't know what our path was going to be, but it was such a clarifying, kind of really spiritual moment that hit both of us simultaneously. Mm-hmm. And, I mean.
Yeah, because at that time, I don't mean to interrupt, but I mean, what came down really as a complete vision was that if the families will take the focus off the alcoholic and put it on themselves, and how are they going to change what they're doing with love and with a plan and everything else, because Vern Johnson had already kind of birthed the idea of modern intervention, but he did not have a method. There was not a manualized way and there certainly wasn't a way to bring love into the fore and to use that in a specific and organized way. And all this kind of just came to us.
Well, you have to understand at that time, there was probably, I don't know, at the most a handful of national level interventionists, like
three.
And three. And that was not nobody knew the word. It wasn't a word that people knew, intervention. People didn't know what that was. We didn't have using that word for every single thing. You've got to have a wardrobe intervention, every kind of intervention. It just wasn't heard of at that time. In fact, I was worried about somebody in my life, and I asked one of the counselors I was new, and asked one of the counselors at Hazelden at the time, what can I do? And they're like, well, I guess the only thing you could do is leave a big book out on their coffee table. That's how unknown intervention was.
Wow, that's crazy.
Crazy to imagine that. Yeah.
So many. We hear these stories all the time. It's like all roads lead back to Hanley. There is magic in the soil there, and we love that. All of these things. Really started there. Got their life. And continue to work with. Yesterday, I was reading research, and Carol Colleran's name popped up It just happened to be something I was looking at. It's funny that you say Carol, we miss her, but she created treatment for older adults at Hanley. All these roads lead right back.
At a time where that did not exist anywhere, and Debra, you and she wrote the first book that was really out, and there wasn't anything when you guys wrote the book, Aging in Addiction.
That's right.
And it was just a track, and I was the first coordinator of the track, before there was an actual freestanding program. And, we were figuring things out, and I felt really fortunate to be able to have that opportunity. But see, I started, because it's a second career for me. This is a second career. And, but I was young. Believe me, I realized I needed a
You're
second
still
career.
young. You're still young.
And, but so I decided, it was a funny thing, because I went through a family program at a treatment center in Columbus, Ohio, because I went to Ohio State University. I was still living there. And I had this complete epiphany, and I went to Al-Anon, and I fell in love with recovery for families and Al-Anon and the 12 steps. I mean, it saved my life. It changed everything for me. And then I wanted to work in the field. So I started at Hanley as a CD tech.
Wow.
And we didn't have computers yet. Just
That's
kidding
crazy.
myself. But so
You were so young. You were 12, right? Is that what we agreed before that we were going to say?
I was a prod, what's the word
Prodigy.
again?
Prodigy.
You were a prodigy.
Prodigy.
You were
Thank
8.
Yes.
12-year-old. But, so I was able to sit. One of my jobs was to type all of the dictation.
Wow.
So the learning process, and then I did I did 14 months. It was the first time when they had the counselor training program there, and then did a 3-month full-time internship there. But what I learned was incredible, because I heard everybody's notes. I was typing that, and then they had Fellowship Club, the halfway house, so we were getting all of the charts from Center City. So I would sit and read all of the assessments and all of the notes. Wow. So there was this richness, and my degree was in psychology, but I was working in the fine arts field. And but the richness of what I learned there, and the people working there was a good percentage that came from Center City, the mothership, of Hazelden. Because it was Hanley Hazelden then. And I have everything that has happened in my life started at Hanley. Everything. Wow. Everything. There's nothing that the roots weren't at Hanley, And so, the gratitude and the love for that place. And if I may say, seeing what you're doing today, does my heart good, because you're programming everything you're doing, the creativity, just.
Yeah, it's really great. And I mean, Hanley then and Hanley now, I think is able to find that great balance between being clinically sophisticated and bringing in the latest and greatest, and realizing at the same time that the long-term recovery is going to be in the community and away from professional resources. And so making sure that both are married into the program, knowing that, the destination is not to be in treatment for the rest of your life. It's to be back in community and family.
That's right.
If we're looking
and so there's a balancing act between clinical and recovering community stuff. And Hanley's always struck a great balance, and it's not easy to do.
And, we like to talk about evidence-based, but, you look at the Cochrane collaboration with Harvard and Stanford.
That's right.
When they looked at research all around the world, and the two things that are most important and have the most effect on lasting sobriety, not 3 months, but they looked 3 years out. One, of course, Alcoholics Anonymous and 12-step programs, but the other was treatment centers that did facilitation, 12-step facilitation that included the 12 steps. Those two things were key, and that's what you do. Yeah. Plus, of course.
So
other.
So let's take a couple steps back. I'm always surprised at families who really don't know what to do. So talk to us about, an experience. Talk to us about a family that calls you and how you advise them. And,
Oh, sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think this is really going to be interesting for our listeners.
Probably going to be more than just leave a big book out.
Yes, I think so. Maybe a little, just a
Yes,
little
isn't
more.
that
We have
true?
progressed since
Well,
then, John.
what
And,
happens is,
Jeff starts out with families.
Yeah.
So they
I'll
make
talk
their
about
way
the
to
front
me.
end, and Deborah will
Okay.
talk more about structured family. But
Good.
when a family first calls, they're typically, they're at their wits' end. They think they've done everything. They think, all this stuff.
And they're mad.
And they may be mad. Some are mad, some are sad, there's this whole throughout the
Terrified.
family system, there's a spectrum from, we've got to save him to no, I'm going to kill him,
Yeah.
and everything in between.
Yes, that's murder.
The first intervention is always on the family to bring them together as a recovery team, not just an intervention team, because an intervention team has an expiration date, like when the admission happens. So,
And
we
I'd
wanna
like
create
to
them-
put up a sign right here that says you're using a word that our folks here, intervention team, it is not what you see on TV. That is not
No.
an intervention team. That is, that's
Yeah.
no.
We
That's
wanna-
that's
because we-
what not to do.
That's what not to do. That's right.
Right. We want to show people, first of all, that they haven't done everything. They've made some good efforts. Maybe they'll say they've been to treatment 5 times. Like, how long were they there? Oh, 3 days, 5 days.
Right.
They don't even necessarily, and why would they know the nomenclature between, going to detox and going to treatment, and how long are you in treatment and so forth. So there's an education process, but there's also got to be this process of engendering hope and giving them a vision of what can be. That, the good news is, yes, you've tried a lot of things, but your loved one has not gotten treatment that was long enough and strong enough and sophisticated enough to address everything that's going on. But if we work together as a team and use that power of love and concern in a very specific and organized way, then it's very likely we're going to be able to break through their natural defenses and denial and bring them to a moment of clarity where they will say, yes, I will go, and then get them there as soon as possible. So you want to give them that vision and then take them through the nuts and bolts, and there's a lot of them, of preparing for a good, loving family intervention, doing the intervention, and then having the larger vision that comes from Debra of structured family recovery. But anyway, I'm covering a lot of things very quickly, and I don't know if I'm really answering your question.
But if I can jump in when it comes to this, we're very aware of the fact that we are probably, like, nobody else is going to have access to this whole team of people. I mean, certainly in treatment, you want releases of information so you have at least one family member you can talk to, but you don't have time to be talking to 7, 8 people,
Right.
So we are probably the only time that we're going to have this whole group together. So there's a lot of responsibility in what we achieve with them. So yes, we want ultimately to get the person into treatment, right? That's the goal, but there's so many other goals there. And the art of intervention is so important. Like Jeff, when he meets with them, there's an art to getting them to talk about the history. We're getting the richest, deepest history anyone's going to get about this, the beloved person that's suffering from this disease. And there's such an art on who talks first, who you should never call on first, all of this, and getting the information, getting everybody unified, because they're not unified. The family is not unified. Typically, they're at each other's throats. They have a lot of disagreements.
Yeah.
And the other thing that Jeff is so brilliant at is then he goes around and he asks everybody individually, what do you love best about this person? What is it about them?
love
And
that.
that's when the people cry. They break down. And, that's when it comes out so powerfully that as mad as they are, or as frightened as they are, whatever the emotion is, at the end of the day, they love this person dearly.
Yeah.
And they're terrified terrified of losing them.
That's right.
And when you do that really in a really pitch perfect way, and you know what you're doing, you fuse that team together. And with that power, you have to bring them together solidly so that when you move forward, it is a totally different experience. And during the intervention, their beloved alcoholic or addict feels that. They feel it in the air, you know?
Yeah. It's like a tsunami of love.
It is.
Exactly.
It is. And it's very powerful. And it's very different than what the beloved alcoholic or addict has been experiencing with their family.
That's right.
You know,
That's
very different feelings.
So key. That's so key that it's so, you know, people think, you know, you got to really get people to, you know, you got to beat them down to change. Well, most people have been beating themselves down. They've been having people beat them down. So in marriage and family therapy, we talk about first order change and second order change, right? So we talk about change that is kind of, you know, there's a problem and we do something to change the problem and it feels better. But second order change is when we change the system that problem exists, that supports that problem. And it is, you know, you're describing so many times when families have that moment where they've had the intervention and their loved one goes to treatment, their loved one arrives at treatment and they feel, you know, they feel like they can breathe. And a lot of times what we've seen over the years, and I read your work, you've seen this phenomena, is that sometimes people will just think the job's done. But really that's just the first order change. That's just something that's important, something that has to happen, but it's a temporary solution. So how do you help families? How do we help families move into second order change where the whole system of the family starts to change and become a healthier, better functioning machine?
Yeah.
And that's always been the big question. Jeff can talk about, just changing language. First of all, you're not an intervention team, you're a recovery team. There's a different expectation. So in the
I love
process,
that should be our new TV show, Recovery.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And, Jeff can talk about all that prep work when you're preparing for the intervention, because you've got a high motivation wave, right? That's temporary, but you can get people to do more when the motivation wave is high. And you're not amping it up artificially. It's already there.
That's right.
And
You're using what's there.
using what's there. When John says, they can finally breathe, guess what? The motivation goes way down. Now I can just relax. And those good people at Hanley have her,
Right.
So I don't have to think about it. We want to keep meaningful things happening to keep them engaged, and
That's right.
Jeff does that and all of our clinical interventionists do that through that process of the intervention.
Yeah, we want to present them with a big picture. And of course, they have their immediate concern and they want to get the person into treatment, and that's great. But as you said, that's only the beginning. And we want to talk about a recovery team and a bigger picture and what is it going to look like and how can they participate. And one of the drivers of that is their knowledge, because let's face it, treatment is not a new idea now. And everybody has their little nightmare stories of their friend or another family member who went to treatment and then relapsed. So we can build on that and say, we can make that much less likely if everybody gets on the bandwagon. And that's where we can then introduce structured family recovery, which is Debra's brainchild, and the whole book of It Takes a Family, and how it works and how it's fashioned, to some extent from physician health programs and the outsized success that they get, and bringing all those kinds of supports together for quote unquote normal families, and creating a real structure for success and for recovery.
Debra, talk about the book. I should have brought my copy. If you have one there, show it for our. Okay, so this
I do have one.
And before,
everybody should read this.
Yeah, before she does, I want to put the plug in here. So we're very careful about books that we recommend and things like that.
Very
And we
careful.
have a very specific list for people who come in. We have a 5-day family program that then goes on after that. And we recommend this. This is on our very short list of recommendations for families. And I'm going to tell you, more than, and every book on there is powerful. More than any one, this is the one that people will come in and they've read it before. They've come to family program and they'll say, thank you for having me read that book. So I just want you to know that
It's
that
like
has
a eureka
been,
moment.
especially the past couple of years, past 2 years, for whatever reason, it again and again, this book. So yes, I'll let you talk about it, but I've never been able to tell you that, and I wanted
Thank
you to know
you.
that.
I mean, that means a lot to me because, I am, or as Jeff is a recovering alcoholic, I'm the family side of this disease. So I understand. I mean, when I was growing up in Duluth, Minnesota, we were 2.5 hours from Hazelden, and we didn't even know Hazelden existed.
Wow.
So my parents' marriage fell apart, divorce. I lived through what kids live through when a parent doesn't get help. And so it matters a lot to me, and certainly because of I think of my dad, he would have been fabulous in Alcoholics Anonymous had he been given a chance, So anyway, this means a lot to me because this is really my passion as to why the why behind why I got in this field is eventually to be able to work with families. And the thing about it is, I mean, we could see things like with doctors, we can see this isn't like a physician health program, but you can see where these things can work differently for certain groups. But it takes a family does something so different. And, it's funny how things can kind of come to you all at once, but it's like years of thinking and doing. And then all of a sudden you have this moment. And it's super simple, but it's almost hard to explain. But I think the thing that's most important for people to realize what makes it so different is, first of all, the family is not treated as a group of individuals. It is like in structured family recovery, that SFR team is like a unit and they work as a unit. And it's interesting because it's hard to find things like that. And the one place where you really can find it is team sports psychology. So, Michael Jordan doesn't get them to the nationals. It takes the team. And you're all individuals, but you're playing as a unit. And that's what happens to the family. And it is all positive brain. So it's like we're working as a unit, but we keep our focus on ourselves, and it's extremely structured. So there's a behavioral expectation, but it's not from any person. It's the structure of it. And what ends up happening is so magical, because even when the beloved alcoholic or addict joins, they quickly are no longer the identified patient because they've been in treatment. They're kind of a leader. They have there's no leader, but they have greater knowledge, and everyone looks to them. And everybody, so there's so much to talk about. There are two things that are so important to realize that I base this on virtue ethics and role ethics. And what are those? Because we have this whole expectation of that everybody has their own 12-step program, Al-Anon for families, AA or NA for the addicted person. So one thing, virtue ethics asks the question, who am I? Right? Who am I?
Right.
Well, that's what I brought to Al-Anon, or Jeff brought to AA, right? Because that's where I'm bringing negative brain. I'm working the steps to get through that, and I'm changing and improving who I am. But the other thing is role ethics, and role ethics asks a different question, a very powerful one. Who am I in relation to you?
Right.
Yeah. This is my favorite.
Yes.
Sorry.
And that's structured family recovery. I'm never talking about you ever. I'm only talking about me. We're staying in positive brain. And what happens is so magical. I did an academic paper, secondary data research paper on why SFR works. And it is phenomenal, the information I basically got out of the social sciences and the business world on why it works, but families change very quickly. But the positive brain is so important. It brings them together. And I don't want to be dorky, but can I read something out of here?
Please, yes,
Please.
yes, yes.
So the great Dr. George
We're
Valen from
very
Harvard.
dorky.
I mean,
We're very dorky. He's
You're very
more
dorky.
dorky than I am.
So Dr. George Valen out of Harvard, they picked him to be the head of their addiction program. Plus, he ran the human development study for 30 years. The grant study that started in 1938 has followed all those Harvard
Yes.
fellows, and then the boys from Boston that came from poverty. Now they followed their wives. Now they're following their children. So lots of wisdom with this man, what he's learned. And I have to read it so I don't misquote him, because this says it all. He wrote a book called Spiritual Evolution, and he wrote, negative emotions are often crucial for survival, but only in time present. So that speaks to families. They're not dysfunctional.
Yes.
They're in crisis.
That's right.
In time present.
Today, right now.
Right now, they're in crisis. But he goes on, the positive emotions are more expansive and help us broaden and build. They help us to survive in time future. This is what structured family recovery does.
Yes.
Time future. And he goes on to say, our negative emotions are in service of the I. This is what we experience when we're living with active addiction in our family, whereas our positive emotions are supportive of the we. Yeah. And I put this in the second edition. I hadn't seen it before because it explains SFR to a T. It is this coming together of families, and they, I mean, I'm not Pollyanna. It's not like all families stick, but families, they just, they just stick. And we have families that have been doing it for 5 years. We never ask anybody to do it. They're like, can I give you an example of a family?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a great example. We call this family the War of the Roses family. You've seen the movie?
Yes.
War of the Roses, like the divorce from hell, right? So, it's mom, it's dad, it's the beloved alcoholic and sibling. Both the beloved alcoholic and the sibling are adults with their own careers. Mom and dad, when they start, have been going through the most contentious, hateful divorce for a year. Oof. They're in the middle of the divorce and they despise each other. Now, I might think, we have got to keep the beloved alcoholic away from these people because this is terrible. Yep, but in structured family recovery, it takes care of it. It moves everyone into positive brain. So we're like, the only reason you can't be in is if you're active in addiction. If you're active in addiction, you got to get into recovery before you can be part of the team. But other than that, or it's something really severe, like,
abuse.
Yeah.
Abuse.
Right.
Which we hardly ever see.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the thing is, they start this, and mom and dad hate each other. They go through the whole year, 50 weeks of this, and I'm invited the last day of their 50 weeks. And it was unbelievable what they said, because they talked to each other at the end. And the sibling that wasn't addicted, he said, now we don't have to be afraid when we get married of mom and dad to be there. Or if we have children, we don't have to be afraid of inviting both of them, And dad says, in front of mom, who they're still in the middle of this hateful divorce, he goes, I used to be a really bad guy. He goes, but you know what? I got SFR. I have my Al-Anon group. I have my sponsor. I have a weekly program of recovery, and I have changed. And he goes, and I tell my friends, I don't care if you don't have an alcoholic in your family. You need to go to Al-Anon. And I'm listening to this and I'm blown away, right? And then, of course, the beloved alcoholic, what he had to say to his family brought tears to everybody's eyes.
So good.
So I thought to myself, these parents can walk away and hold their head up high, that in spite of everything, we did the right thing. not just for the one child, but for both children.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Which is incredible. But then the next day I get a call from their SFR counselor and she said, "You're never going to believe this." And I said, "What?" She said, "Dad called me this morning. He said, we want to do another year."
Wow.
That family ended up doing 3 years. They got divorced. He met somebody, he remarried. They were still doing SFR through the whole thing. So it shows you the worst possible family situation.
Yeah.
I mean, it was horrible. It was ugly.
Yeah.
But that process and the structure and the positive brain that George Valence so beautifully explains brought them along in spite of everything going on behind the scenes that never entered into the world of structured family recovery.
And that's the power of working with this system. No matter what, we exist in these systems. And so there's sometimes this idea as well, don't work with this person or that person's too chaotic. But if it's part of the system, when we want healing, we've got to work with the whole system. I love that. It's so beautiful.
And so we don't have the family bringing the negative to each other. We have them taking that to their 12-step meetings and working the steps with their sponsors to deal with it.
I want to just touch for a minute on denial, because almost always in these family systems, there is one person who is in complete denial and says about the beloved alcoholic, and I hope all our listeners have heard that term, the beloved alcoholic, right? This is all about love. This is all about joy. What do you do with the member of the family system who is so in denial that he or she is saying, "Oh, the beloved alcoholic is fine. They don't need treatment. There is not a problem here." And I'm not gonna talk about the ending. I'm gonna let you guys talk about it.
So typically I know about that person before we do what we call in our practice module 1. And part of module 1 is I gather the entire, extended team that's going to be part of the intervention and recovery process, typically on Zoom because people are spread out geographically. Sure. And we go through a history gathering process one at a time. I'm calling on one person at a time and I'm taking them through what they know about Johnny, okay, and asking them at the end, now let's go on the other side of the ledger. Let's talk about the strong points, the things that you admire, the things that you love. The person that you're describing, I already know about them because I've been talking to the leader about who's who. And I'm going to put them at the end or very near the end. So they will have heard history and history and history and history and history, because typically that person that's that much in denial doesn't know enough. They're just seeing the externals. Hey, Johnny's a lawyer. He's got a nice job, and so I kind of place them at the end. Why? So that they can save face. So that I can preserve their dignity too. So I can give them a chance to say, I didn't realize what you've been going through at home. Yeah. I didn't see any of that. And I'm so sorry. Really what I knew before tonight was very little. All I saw is that he was high functioning, and yes, he drank too much at the 4th of July, but so there's a way to bring them on board without, having them pinned and wriggling on the wall.
Yeah, because it's all about love and joy.
And what
all about
and
it,
healing.
And being, you want to be loving, but you want to be smart. And that's why as a clinical interventionist, I always want to have as much information as possible every step of the way, because I can't tell you how often things like, an old TBI from when they were 8 that was never addressed comes through. And I'm going to put that into my clinical synopsis that I give to the treatment team, because the patient isn't going to tell you about it. They don't even remember it, but it may be a thing, and it may be something that has to be evaluated. And maybe that's why they're not retaining so much with the reading, and et cetera, et cetera. So going back to what Debra said earlier, we get to talk to so many people intimately and for a long period of time that often we can elicit bits of information that are critical and then pass them on to the treatment team.
And there's
love that.
trust, because when I was doing interventions and with structured family recovery, I don't anymore, but it was again and again, families would say to me, we have friends that we've known almost our whole life, and we feel closer to you right now than to any of these friends. So what Jeff is describing, they feel, we're always professional, but they feel the love of everybody, and they know that we've made that happen, and that we connect with them too, that we care. Because when I was doing it, I can't tell you the mothers, it'd be usually with a son, and they would bring me to the mantle in the living room, and they want to show me the photos of their son that we were going to be intervening on. And there he'd be with his baseball uniform, and there he'd be in his high school, graduation photo and his wedding photo and holding his first baby. And, what were they saying? We want you to know who our son is,
right,
not the addiction. And I think that's the thing with Jeff, is they know, and the rest of our people that are here, because we're really picky on who is with Love First, they know we care about that person that they love. It's not just, it's the addiction, It's got to come first.
We're also never in a hurry to do an intervention. Some families, they check it out, they begin the process, and then they don't come back around until the next crisis 6 months later. I'm never trying to push anybody into doing anything. I want to give them more information, more things that they can do, and some alternatives too. Sometimes they want, what can we do that's, a lesser step? And I can give them, a lot of different scenarios that they can look at. And if it doesn't work out, you can always come back to doing a more formal, structured, loving family intervention.
And at the same time, if it's really dire, it always is, but we're always like things that you have to do on top of it. But also there are times that people, and believe me, when we first started doing this and having our own practice, we were kind of broke. We didn't have much money. That was the reality,
look at you now.
And people would call, and their kid would be in jail, and they were begging us to take a credit card. And we're like, the intervention has happened. We're just going to guide you now what to do to get them into treatment. And we would say, no. We're not going to charge you for an intervention. And believe me, that hurt. Yeah. There were times, that hurt. But, we always have had, the one thing that we live by is that, our reputation is the most important thing we own. And that means we always have to put the client first and their well-being, even when we take a knock, even when we were broke and worried about paying the mortgage,
Sure. And we're coming to this place where we actually have to wrap up, but
I'm not ready.
I'm not either. I'm not either. And actually, we could have an entire probably several of these. And we mentioned earlier on, we mentioned Carol Colleran, and there may be people who know who that is, and there may be people who don't. And if you don't, Carol was a trailblazer, and she was a mentor of mine, and
she's incredible.
She was very opinionated, nosy, and bossy. And she would agree with all of those things, but one thing that she told me years ago and many times is that she respected the two of you for your ethics and your integrity, and you were on a list of a very short people that she had, that she would say, these are the people that I trust their integrity without question, and you guys were there. I don't even know if I've ever told you that or not.
Thank you.
Never told me that, but thank you. But you were on that list too, because she adored you. And Carol was something, and she knew she was bossy and everything else. She was funny. She was irreverent.
Yes.
She liked good, matchmaking, romance.
Yeah.
She did good with you all.
That's right.
Listen, before we go, Debra, show your book again. I want to urge as many folks to get this as are interested in learning about this incredible process that you walk
Show
families through.
At the end are all the SFR meetings.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah, there's actually a structure of a whole year. There's the
This
first
is the
book
whole
is Love
thing.
First. Do you have a Love First there too, Deborah? Because they're
No,
companion
but can I
books.
just do one thing is that we went to Hazelden Publishing with Love First, which first came out in 2000. So it's third edition, second edition. And we said, we need to do these new editions and make them companion books. So now Love First Intervention moves families right into,
So
it
good.
takes a family with structured family recovery. So that recovery team goes between the two books. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
for those who don't know, Hazelden Betty Ford is a much bigger publishing house than the treatment beds that it has. That the big books, everything.
For sure.
They are the
And they
ones who
partner with
publish
Simon
those.
Schuster now.
Yeah.
Simon Schuster. I mean, when it comes to recovery literature, they're it.
The
They're it.
best, the best of the best.
So we have a tradition where we like to ask our guests to have the last word, and knowing that there are all sorts of people who listen to this, we found out what I'd ask is, would each of you just take a moment and speak to families?
Yeah.
Speak to families that are what is one thing that you would want that family who is struggling with a loved one who's suffering, what is one thing that you would want to hear them say from you? Have them hear from you.
Jeff, you want to start?
There's probably more you can do. Learn more. It doesn't cost anything to call us and just talk a little bit. And if that's too hard, go on our website. We actually have 3.5 hours of the intervention workshop that you can listen to for free. It'll walk you right through the process. You don't even have to buy the book. We have created a lot of resources for you. And frankly, if it wasn't for a good, loving family intervention, I wouldn't have survived my addiction. That's the only reason I'm here today. Yeah. And so take the time and learn a little bit more. And we're there to help you.
I love that.
Deborah?
Yeah, and I'll say lovefirst.net because we are big believers in getting as much free, good information to families to get started. I would say as a family member, there's so much to lose, and sometimes you can never get it back, and you live with it, and it's generational, where kids don't know why they lost their grandpa before they were even born. The losses are so great. Take the small step. Pick up the phone, talk to a really reputable treatment center like the Hanley Center. You can go to our website. You don't have to work with us. Yeah. That's not what it's about. There's lots of free resources. Go to your library. You can get this book in your library. You don't have to buy it. Just check it out of your library. Start reading it. Start reading Love First. Get it from almost all libraries in this country have Love First. Just take that step. And then the person that's most likely to say, yes, I will stand with you, get them to be part of your team and start learning together and grow that team. But get the person who's most likely to say yes to join you first.
I love it.
You guys are fantastic. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for this time. I really do think we need to have like 3 or 4 more of these, right?
Let's do it.
This has been so much fun. You know how much we love you, and we would love to come back. Thank you for asking us.
Can't wait. Right. Dr. Docekal, thank you too.
Dr. Dyben, thank you.
And for everybody who's watching or listening, thank you for being here and taking this time with us. We'll see you next time on The Hanley Effect.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for joining us for The Hanley Effect. To learn more about our programs, visit hanleyfoundation.org or call 844-502-4673.